So the gender pay gap is the difference between the average amount that men and women earn in Australia. It is not equal pay. Equal pay is getting paid the same for the similar or the kind of comparable work between men and women. That's been the law for 50 years. The gender pay gap is the difference between average earnings of men and women, and it's affected by a broad range of factors. Things like feminised industries or industry sectors that have a lot of women in them, like aged care and early childhood education, earning less. It's due to women doing more part-time work over their lifetime because they do tend to take on more caring responsibilities and, of course, have children. So the gap is systemic. It is a very large problem, but it is something that has been narrowing much faster in recent years.
How slowly, is this gap getting smaller?
So the gap depends on how you measure it. The Australian Bureau of Statistics has a measure of full-time earnings, and they have it at 11.5%. The government's Workplace Gender Equality Agency has a much broader and more comprehensive, I think, measure, which takes into account bonuses, part-time work, full-time work, that kind of thing. That's 21.7. Now, even under the smaller measure, essentially what it means is that today is the last day, on average, that Australian women are being paid for their work. I spoke to the person who put together the research for the report, which is the ACTU's President, Michelle ONeal, who runs the peak body of Australian unions. Here are her thoughts on the impact of that gap.
If you look at the average pay between men and women, the gap is still so much that it means that effectively, from today to the end of the year, women are working for free, because average pay in Australia still has an 11.5% pay gap between men and women.
So Dan, what's holding back progress on shrinking the gender pay gap?
There's a lot of things that have to happen, like a lot of complex problems. Think about our inflation issue, think about our housing problem. There's not one solution. If there was, we would have pulled that lever by now. But a lot of things have occurred. Interestingly, the research suggests that the gap has been closing at 3 times the rate under this government than the last government. Now, I spoke to Susan Lee, who is the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, the opposition. She defended the record of that government, but the data is there. And some of the reasons that has happened is because there's been a lot of essentially worker-friendly legislation that's been passed in the past couple of years under the Albanese government. Things like getting rid of pay secrecy and secrecy clauses in contracts, improving the transparency where companies have to say what their gender gap is, and allowing pattern bargaining, which is not just companies negotiating with their employees or with the union, but across whole sectors. And in places like aged care and early childhood education, that's led to massive one-off pay bumps of, in the realm of aged care, 28.5%, and in early childhood, a staggered 15% rise over 2 years. These are really substantial shifts in those sectors, which are largely the work is done by women. So there's a lot going on. That gap is narrowing, but still between 11.5 and 21.7%. That's the average difference between what men and women are earning in Australia.